Kimchi premium. What do you think this term means? No, it's not a Korean dish. It's actually the name of a phenomenon found only in South Korea. Bitcoin on Korean exchanges usually trades about 5% higher than the global average. At one point, the premium reached an astonishing 55%. Yet South Koreans keep buying anyway. South Korea also has one of the highest rates of stock and crypto retail investors in the world. But there's another statistic that's just as striking. Depending on the market, between 70% and 90% of investors end up losing money. So why are so many Koreans willing to borrow heavily just to invest? Why are South Korea's financial markets considered among the most insane and cutthroat on earth? Let's find out in today's video. Welcome to Why Money, where economics becomes simple, interesting, and won't put you to sleep. You probably know South Korea for its famous K-pop groups or addictive K-dramas. As for me, Korean barbecue with kimchi hits the spot every time. Man, talking about it is making me hungry already. But Korea isn't just famous for its pop culture. It's also known for having one of the most reckless, high-octane investment markets in the world. Koreans literally have a specific slang term for scraping together every last penny to throw into investments, Yeong-kkeul. Simply put, it means taking your entire salary, draining your credit cards, maxing out bank loans, borrowing from relatives, and dumping every cent into high-risk markets like stocks, forex, and crypto. Hearing that, you can probably picture the scene. This isn't normal investing anymore. It's borderline extreme. And the crazy part? This isn't just an isolated case of a few risky individuals. It has morphed into a full-blown societal phenomenon across South Korea. This wild behavior shows up clearly in some shocking stats. In recent years, South Korea's household debt to GDP ratio has hovered around 90%. That means total household debt alone equals nearly 90% of the country's GDP. For comparison, that figure is around 68% in the US and about 60% in China. Long story short, South Korea's household debt ratio is sitting right at the top of global rankings. On top of that, the debt-to-income ratio for South Koreans stands at an alarming 174%. In other words, for every $1 you earn, you owe nearly $2. That's why for many Koreans, payday rolls around, almost their entire paycheck goes straight to paying interest. What's left barely covers basic living expenses. Even more concerning, young adults in their 20s and 30s are the demographic accumulating debt at the fastest rate. And where does all that money go? More often than not, it flows into stocks, crypto, real estate, and forex. To understand how wild the Korean real estate market is, we need to talk about a concept called Jeonse. Normally, renting a home is simple. You pay rent every month. Jeonse works completely differently. The tenant hands the landlord a massive deposit upfront, 50% to 80% of the property's actual value. For the entire lease, they pay zero rent, just utilities and maintenance fees. When the lease ends, the landlord returns 100% of the deposit. Sounds like a great deal for the tenant. Live rent-free and get the full deposit back when the lease ends. And the landlord gets a huge interest-free lump sum they can go invest with. But here's where it gets crazy. Both sides end up using financial leverage on the exact same property. For the tenant, where do you even find hundreds of thousands of dollars for a deposit? Credit cards, bank loans, the usual playbook? For the landlord, what do they do with that massive pile of cash? They definitely don't put it into a savings account. They use a strategy called gap investing. For example, a house costs $500,000. The tenant puts down a $400,000 Jeonse deposit. The landlord now only needs $100,000 out of pocket to buy their next property. They repeat this cycle over and over, buying a second, third, fourth house, and so on. When abused, this model functions dangerously like a Ponzi scheme. And as history has shown, it has triggered massive financial disasters. Back in 2022, the infamous Villa King scandal shocked South Korea and made global headlines. A man named Kim used the Jeonse model to hoard over 1,000 properties across the country. When he suddenly passed away, hundreds of people couldn't recover their deposits. Money many of them had borrowed just to come up with in the first place. Sadly, this wasn't an isolated case. Similar situations have played out across Korea, forcing regulators to take a hard look at the risks built into this system. Between 2022 and 2024 alone, total losses from Jeonse deposit defaults near $2.3 billion, with almost 15,000 victims. But sometimes it's not the system that's flawed, it's how people choose to use it. And trust me, it doesn't stop at real estate. The world's biggest casino, the ultimate stop-loss slaughterhouse. These are nicknames often slapped onto Korean retail investors. At first, I thought those descriptions were a bit dramatic, but digging into the data, they actually make total sense. While real estate money moves relatively slowly, stocks, crypto, and forex are a completely different beast, lightning fast. The riskier the asset, the more cautious you should be, right? Instead, plenty of Koreans dive in headfirst, driven by FOMO and pure recklessness. In markets like the US or Europe, institutional investment funds handle most of the trading volume. Established, reputable, relatively safe. But in South Korea, retail investors account for 60% to 70% of daily trading volume. What's more, 14 million out of South Korea's 51 million citizens active in the stock market. That means roughly 1 in every 3 South Koreans trade stocks, an extraordinarily high ratio. There's even a nickname for these small retail investors, Gemi, roughly the ant army. And they share traits with real ants. They are massively numerous. A single ant might be tiny, but the collective force of an entire colony is something else entirely. At the end of June this year, investor euphoria pushed Kospi, Korea's benchmark stock index, to an all-time high of 9,100. But when everyone's greedy at once, everyone hoping their account keeps climbing, the same old story tends to repeat. Kospi then suffered its most terrifying crash in history. When a market crashes too fast, automated safety systems kick in to pause trading. In July alone, Korean investors witnessed not just 1, but 4 separate circuit breakers triggered. The Kosdaq tech exchange went even further, hitting automated circuit breakers 22 times, shattering records set during the 2008 global financial crisis. An absolutely brutal July for Korean stock investors. On average, 1 out of every 30 adults in Korea completely wiped out their trading account during that bloody month. But apparently, daytime stock trading wasn't enough. Korean investors jumped into crypto too. 30% of South Koreans own cryptocurrency. That's a massive number. Among 20 to 30-year-olds, that percentage is even higher. This insane demand created a phenomenon completely unique to South Korea, the kimchi premium. By the way, this video is 100% free, so don't forget to drop a like and hit subscribe so we can bring you more content like this. Because domestic demand is so high, Bitcoin prices on Korean exchanges like Upbit and Bithumb are routinely about 5% higher than international exchanges like Binance. Back in 2018, that gap once spiked to a jaw-dropping 55%, a staggering figure. And yet Korean investors were still willing to pay tens of a percent more than the rest of the world. That's how intense the FOMO gets. It doesn't stop there. The time difference with the West gave rise to a group known as night shift investors. They work regular office jobs by day and stay up until 2 or 3 a.m. monitoring Forex charts, trading gold, crude oil, and US futures contracts. Stocks by day, crypto and Forex around the clock. This 24/7 cycle doesn't just drain people's finances, it wears down their mental health too. They're betting everything: money, health, peace of mind. But this journey is far from all upside. In reality, the people who lose money vastly outnumber the ones who win. So why are South Korean investors so insanely aggressive and reckless? Behind the borderline crazy risk-taking of Korean investors lies a much longer story. It starts with social pressure, so intense it's suffocating. In Korea, how much respect you get is measured by rigid, unforgiving material standards. You need your own apartment, a luxury car, and designer clothes just to be taken seriously. More than that, these are often seen as mandatory prerequisites for dating, getting married, and having kids. But reality is brutal. Housing prices have climbed to levels that are almost irrational. In Seoul, the price of an average apartment is completely decoupled from average incomes. By some estimates, a 20-year-old salaried worker would need 86 years of saving every penny. No food, no spending, just to afford a home. Wages inch up a few percent a year, while housing prices shoot up vertically. The traditional advice to save up gradually and buy a house has become a total illusion for the younger generation. With the door to traditional wealth accumulation slammed shut, young adults fall straight into the next trap: debt addiction and credit cards. To keep the appearance of success that society demands, many people feel forced to lean on credit cards. Korea has one of the highest credit cards per capita rates in the world. The average person carries 4 to 5 credit cards, a genuinely startling number. So the paycheck lands and it evaporates almost instantly, swallowed by interest payments and sky-high living costs. A lot of people realize they're essentially working just to service debt. All of this feeds into a shared feeling across society, a sense of being stuck, paired with a desperate hunger to change their fortunes fast. And high-risk investing starts to look like a lottery ticket for life. The problem is, with an actual lottery, winning is great and losing costs you nothing. But if you lose everything on high-leverage trading, the consequences are catastrophic. It starts with a brutal loss rate and crushing debt pressure on top of that. Statistics show that roughly 80% to 90% of individual retail investors, the ant army, end up losing money in markets like Forex, crypto, and stocks. The dream of one big win almost never shows up. What does show up? Millions of people in their 20s and 30s, buried in debt way too young, carrying consumer loans, credit card debt, and bank loans that can drag on for decades, with almost no realistic path back to financial stability. The psychological burden is immense. In a hyper-competitive culture where net worth dictates social standing, admitting financial failure is taboo. Many spiral into dark places, feeling their lives are ruined beyond repair. South Korea has long held the highest suicide rate among OECD nations. Tragically, in recent years, financial ruin from debt and failed investments has emerged as a leading driver. After every market crash, be it a Jeonse collapse, a crypto fallout, or stock circuit breakers, city authorities in Seoul have had to step up patrols and install additional surveillance cameras along the bridges crossing the Han River. Debt defaults and financial pressure gave rise to the term Enpo generation, A generation giving up on a long list of social milestones. First dating, marriage, having children. Then eventually, career ambitions, financial goals, and even hope for the future itself. So, in the end, what are we actually working for? Everyone has a different answer. Freedom to travel, taking care of family, proving your own worth. But push one layer deeper. What's the point of having all that? Most answers eventually converge on the same thing. Safety, freedom, happiness. And safety, freedom, happiness are, at the end of the day, just feelings. There's more than one path to get there. Sometimes knowing when you have enough, being content with what you already have, is happiness in itself. You don't have to gamble everything on financial markets, where the losers always outnumber the winners. Always leave yourself a way out, and never borrow money to invest. You can always lose everything you put in, so make sure that even if that happens, you're still able to start over from scratch. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Wishing you peace and wisdom in your financial journey. See you next time.